Well, we're wrapping up this year of the Business Immigration Benchmark. Thank you for tuning in. We've got Audrey Lustgarten, WR Managing Partner for our global program. We'll be talking about big themes that came up from many of our surveys in 2024, and then offer some insights into what we can expect in 2025 and what we understand is top of mind for global mobility professionals for the new year with a lot of changes and new administrations coming into play and shaking things up in the global mobility space.
Definitely. Thanks for
So,
having me, Laura. It's great to be here. And yes,
yeah, you've been along
a
for the
lot to
ride.
talk about. It's been an interesting year, and I think 2025 is going to be even more interesting and challenging.
Yeah, if we were hoping for a calm and low key Q4 of 2024, that
Now,
has not been the story. And, I
but
think we're busier than ever with trying to prepare for 2025. So, with this wrap up, we'll kind of try to get it all in. In August and September of this year, we surveyed about 60 global mobility leaders from programs with an average US foreign national population of about 404 foreign national employees to ask them what their biggest priorities of their programs were. The top 5 themes most cited were around compliance, cost control and budget management, efficiency, employee experience and support, and technology and data integration. Let's kick it off with, summarizing the top 3. I think those really were themes we saw time and time again with our clients and our practices. So, Audrey, what were the biggest compliance challenges you saw for your clients in 2024? Big question.
yeah, a lot to unpack there. I think I really kind of split it into compliance challenges with short-term assignments globally and then with the longer-term assignments because the challenges look a little bit different. For the short-term assignments, business traveler folks, what I saw was companies struggling a little bit to just keep a handle on who was going where when and making sure that they had the right visas and having systems in place to track so it wasn't all just a total manual exercise of the poor, HR or global mobility manager trying to keep track of where people were going to be when. And then, being surprised if someone hops on a plane to do a short term assignment without the right visa, they turn up in the country they're going to and potentially get turned back around, which is everyone's nightmare. So, did see a bit of that in 2024. Definitely, the authorities were scrutinizing business travelers, scrutinizing short-term assignments. So really important to have those correct visas before getting on the airplane. And then looking at the longer term folks, typically we know where they are. If someone's moving to another country for 5 years, it's known. People notice. So less likely to fly under the radar. For those folks, it's more of an issue with proper record keeping. Doing right to work checks in the right way, which is, the British way of saying I-9, right to work check. Making sure that you've got the documentation on file because we've really seen an uptick in audit activity where companies who have sponsored foreign nationals for work permits on a long-term basis are being approached by the government and asked to show their records to document that they have actually complied with the terms of the permit. And if your record keeping is kind of not up to par, it can be pretty anxiety inducing when you get that knock at the door, that phone call or that email from the government asking you to document, what this person has done over the past 2 years and that you've been in compliance. So I'd say those are the big challenges.
Piggybacking off of Audrey's compliance challenges for long-term sponsorships in the US immigration space, we're seeing that crop up for the labor market test or the perm programs. We're seeing more clients struggle with testing the US labor market in certain cities and jurisdictions where there are available and qualified US workers applying for the positions and therefore eliminating or challenging the possibility for that application to be lodged for the foreign national worker, as well as the timelines associated with filing even a successful labor market test. Because these are taking so long, it's really challenging the maintenance of status for many foreign national employees for our clients. So, managing those timelines for many of our global mobility leaders in the US are difficult, and we're having to come up with relocations using Audrey's support to make sure that they're retaining the talent and moving them abroad. Sometimes that sets up a more favorable US immigration strategy, but nonetheless increases costs. So there's a lot of compliance challenges there from just maintaining the status because of the challenges and delays on the green card space. The other thing we've seen as a, challenge over the last couple of years, especially in the wake of the pandemic, is maintaining compliant I-9s. And this is a theme that will continue to be a challenge for companies in 2025. But because there were so many changes in the I-9 form itself and all these exceptions that were allowed for certain periods under the global pandemic with electronic or the I-9 review electronically and the documents being submitted electronically and folks trying to just understand and keep up with the changes because it was very fluid. And then the period in which to comply and go back on all those I-9s, many clients were just so confused. And so I think, throughout the last year, folks were really trying to clean up their I-9s, and we'll see that tested in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we will.
So, the other theme that really came up in this last year for a lot of my clients, and I know yours too, was, cost control and budget management. So we've seen a year of a lot of layoffs, especially for the tech industry, evolving return to office policies, which then sort of end up being kind of like a soft layoff exercise for employers. The uncertainty of the US election that we saw this year, now we know what's happening and, have to prepare for that. How are your companies managing these cost containment efforts, and what were themes that came out of 2024, and what are your clients talking about in 2025?
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a challenge for some of my clients that have been harder hit than others financially, economically, dealing with those layoffs, dealing with return to work. I think that one of my favorite lines was from a client that I spoke with on a panel. She was like, "Oh, well, we don't need to hire more resources internally because we don't have the funds to do that. We just rely on our external counsel to do more and more work," which made me laugh, of course, but it is true. And I think that really, as global mobility leaders are facing budget cuts and potentially, being asked to do more with less internally, I think it's really good to make sure that they are relying on external counsel as much as possible and getting as much bang for their buck. Whether you're hiring us or another provider, make sure that you are asking counsel to support you as much as possible. Ask for their help, not just with processing the cases, but how can you make your program better? How can you make it more efficient and more effective? So you're reducing the workload on the internal team and really leveraging that external team when you're in a position of, hiring freezes or reductions and you don't have those internal resources to tap. And I think also this overlaps a little bit with the next topic we'll talk about, but leveraging technology, to the extent that you can set up systems and processes to be really efficient and set up integrations so that there are not so many human touch points going on. You can reduce the workload and reduce potentially the spend on immigration related matters while hopefully, maintaining the employee experience and getting folks where they need to be in the world.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we're seeing more and more proactive work, whether that be using the technology to provide the reports so that you're eliminating the costly problems because most things can be solved in the global mobility space. It's just at what expense and how quickly. And so when global mobility leaders are actively running reports, keeping the data clean and leveraging their immigration partners to help them do that, it eliminates the costly problems that, crop up when someone's out of status or out of compliance and then have to file things quickly or have to travel to sort of, correct the situation. So that's kind of like the first move we saw a lot of folks push for in the last year. We weren't seeing huge hiring for our clients across the board. What we saw was, definitely consolidation. We saw folks move away from premium processing everything and being more proactive with timely extensions that if an application could be filed at the 6 months extension mark in the US, they were looking to do that to avoid the premium processing for extensions. Some programs took bigger steps to eliminate support for dependents, Some of them were looking to do that into 2025. I think now with the knowledge that we know the Trump administration is coming into place, folks are really looking at their budgets and estimating for more challenges,
Yeah.
more costs associated with responding to challenges from the government, whether that's in the form of requests for evidence or getting budgets for extensions to be filed in the US as opposed to at consular posts abroad. That was a strategy for cost savings, that it was cheaper to send someone abroad for an L1 renewal, where now there are potentially more risks with traveling outside the US with the Trump administration. So looking to increase budgets, even though the number or headcount for foreign national sponsored is not going up. I think 2025 is going to be tough in the sense of folks are looking to constrict budgets, but things are going to get more costly to maintain compliance and to manage risk, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and the other place that we see it, globally where the budget is impacting things is, the governments where they have significantly increased filing fees. And we are definitely seeing some trends around that, where if, it's a client that is in a position where they've got an office in the UK and Ireland and the Netherlands, well, looking at spending, tens of thousands of dollars to sponsor a foreign worker in the UK if they could easily be located in Ireland or the Netherlands instead at a lower cost. That is something that they're starting to take into consideration when they're laying out their strategy. Obviously, not everyone has that flexibility depends on the role, depends on the company if you can do it. But if you can, it's a way to save a significant amount of costs.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the pressure that a lot of our contacts in the global mobility space, like our, HR folks, the global mobility leaders that we're working day to day, I think the companies are putting a lot of pressure on them to do more, but not necessarily hire out a bigger team. So, they
Yeah.
may be sponsoring or supporting more and more foreign nationals
Yeah.
because that's where the talent is, and the business is gonna make the decision to hire the most talented employees that they can, regardless of their citizenship, nationality, or visa sponsorship,
Yep.
and these folks, our global mobility teams, aren't expanding, but maybe are supporting more. So, yeah, to your point, I think that's a valid comment from the client, like, "Well, no, we're relying on you more because their headcount on their teams isn't increasing because they don't have the budget for that."
Yeah. Absolutely.
Too funny. And that partners really well with the third most common topic we heard from our clients in 2024, which was efficiency. I think, these are sort of the same issues, just coming at it a little bit different or stating the challenge a different way. So, what are you hearing about efficiency, and how are your clients grappling with how to be more efficient in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah. I mean, I love it when clients are focused on being more efficient because it causes me pain to look at processes and see them being like, no, this doesn't have to be like this with, so many different factors involved and inefficiencies. So it is a bright spot in my day when I get to work with clients on improving efficiencies. I think that the theme there is really systems integration. Like it is, I would say, fairly uncommon these days that folks don't have multiple systems that they're working with. You have a immigration case management platform, you have an HRIS, maybe there's a recruitment platform going on. There's all these different systems. And I think that while systems are great and certainly far superior to having Excel spreadsheets, there's the potential for system overload and for them to introduce inefficiency because you have so many different places, and also to end up with problems with, data hygiene and not having consistent data. So I think really I've seen a lot of clients focusing on systems integrations and how can they work more efficiently and more effectively in fewer systems. My favorite kind of pet project of the year was an integration that we did with our case management platform Rapid and a client's recruiter platform Ashby, where they were really having some challenges with the recruiters. There was a lot of turnover on the recruiter team. They have a large team of recruiters. Getting those folks to use a whole bunch of different platforms when there is that amount of turnover can kind of be chaos. So by integrating Rapid and Ashby, we were able to make it to where the recruiters could stay happily in one platform they were familiar with. And the platform would interact on the back end with our case management platform. So they would just submit, a consultation request and they would get the results back. And it cut out the emails, it cut out the questions, the confusion. And just, I saw that really making our global mobility context life much easier without getting all those questions and having all those issues with the recruiter team. So I think focusing on things like that, where you can simplify and integrate systems is something that is really popular with companies right now.
Cool success story for 2024. Yeah, I think, the efficiency is a challenge for a lot of clients. I'm, kind of growing up with a few of my clients, and some of the challenges they face is, with those integrations that Audrey's mentioning, it's low priority for, their internal tech team to,
Yeah.
help support. So, as the immigration vendor, we are, offering the bridge to their system, but they ultimately need their company's tech support also involved to, connect the bridge or the stairs down into their system. And that's not always a priority. So there's a lot of like in between fixes that we're looking to sort of pour reports and things like that and looking to get creative with what can we do in the intermediate as, we're looking to get that priority time and resource on their side. So there's some of that. I think the data integrity does provide efficiency and the training in how your, HR teams are even updating on their side if you have the data flow. So, one thing that has come up with one of my clients is, they have their recruiting or HR team entering data into their
Yeah.
HRIS, but it's not always correct, and that's what is flowing into our system, and so it's sort of almost a bigger HR or corporate issue to sort of reach the HRBPs that normally don't touch immigration and how they're entering the data because that sort of impacts the immigration data. So a lot of it is training and can feel quite manual, with the goal of efficiency in mind. So there are a number of cases that we're sort of looking through that our global mobility teams are looking to reach deeper into their organization to influence stakeholders that have nothing to do with immigration because there's like downflow efficiency impacts, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think both points are good, that there are in between fixes if you can't get a flashy integration that's just perfect and very exciting, but doing a lot with the reporting and leaning again on your provider and having them help with training too to the extent that it's possible. I mean, we did a whole series of trainings for different HR teams for one client. We went around the world to each one of their country locations and trained their HR teams, and that really improved the efficiency and also the compliance
Sure.
because they were having trouble with, inaccurate data being put in, and then it looks like someone has work authorization, and actually they
Yeah.
don't. But the HR was not familiar with, what the different documents. So that can help both with efficiency and with making sure that you are being compliant.
Yeah, and I think, when we talk about becoming more efficient, I think that, obviously is a cost management, right? If you're spending less time in manual processes, you open capacity for either your global mobility team or whatever it might be. And so again, it's kind of just another way to look at cost management is are we being the most efficient? So sometimes, one thing I'm doing with my client right now that we're struggling with getting the data out of HR because of how their sort of shared system works. We're totaling the hours it takes their global mobility lead to collect the data and breaking that down into sort of like an hourly rate to say like this is how much it's costing
Right.
the business to get this information
Yeah.
because that's compelling to leaders to then, create a better system or automate it, which is what we're going for and to invest there because of how much it's costing in time. So a lot of times you can kind of make the business case if you're finding some inefficiencies. Just another way to sort of look at that. Okay, 2025. Phew. I hope we all have strong coffee and positive attitudes for 2025. I think across the board, we're going to be in stricter compliance, right? The US globally. So tell us about what you're focused on
Yeah.
in 2025 and what your clients are saying about compliance.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think the US is going to be the only jurisdiction to really ramp up compliance in 2025. Sad to say, I think that's going to be a big theme for the year, just with some of the political situations going on and anti immigrant sentiment that often leads to more money being put into compliance initiatives and audits and site inspections. And we are seeing that in the UK. There's been a huge ramp up, which we think will continue well into 2025 of sponsor license audits. Similarly in Canada, I think, which is really too bad because Canada, the last Trump administration, Canada was a nice place to park foreign nationals that maybe couldn't get into the US. But we've even seen there, in a historically immigrant friendly setting, some pushback and some crackdown in terms of, reducing who can qualify for different common categories of work permits and really being more stringent in the compliance setting. So I think that's just going to continue throughout 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are absolutely gonna see some crazy headlines in the US immigration space January 20th. It's gonna be obviously a lot around the southern border and enforcement, militarization there, but also we're gonna see internal efforts for, removal and deportation orders. Now, that's not impacting directly the employment-based space, but we are expecting increased audits for I-9 for all companies across the board. That is where there is infrastructure there for business to pay heavy fines for I-9 noncompliance and employing unauthorized workers. So there's obviously some industries that are more susceptible or use unauthorized workers like construction, hospitality. So those are obviously expected to be initial targets, but that doesn't mean other industries are safe. The I-9 infrastructure for ICE and CBP to be enforcing those fines and compliance are there and will be beefed up. So expect your I-9s to be tested. So if you haven't already started to sort of prepare for this, reach out to your counsel to put together an action plan and execute as quickly as possible because that is going to be the case. I think the other thing we're seeing as a need for our clients and what they're expressing is a efficient or ability to clearly communicate changes to their foreign national populations, to their employees generally, when there are changes in immigration, travel, global mobility policies. So if you haven't already, dust off your SOPs from the first Trump administration, refresh those. And, last Trump administration, we had, policy by tweet, Friday at 5 p.m., close of workday. There'd be sort of some new announcement. So, make sure you have some sort of protocol of how you're communicating to your employees to get the right and relevant information out as soon as possible and make sure that it's, relevant. We don't want to be scaring folks unnecessarily, but preparing them for any updates for travel and making sure they're checking in, especially, with a global program, like Audrey talked about in previous episodes, like what's the process, what's the protocol for like telling the company you're traveling for business? Because
Yeah.
if the company is able to run reports very quickly, they're able to then communicate things out to the relevant people as soon as possible who are impacted. But if there's no policy and how you're tracking folks for short-term, long-term assignments, it's going to be really messy and there are going to be gaps and folks then are impacted both personally and the business talent pipeline is impacted. So make sure there's some sort of protocol in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ability to kind of report on different segments of your population is absolutely key. Having that data so you or your provider can run a very quick report to identify who's going to be impacted by, the Friday at 5 tweet or whatever else might come out on short notice so you can get in touch with those people and minimize the impact and, give them some measure of comfort that you realize this. You're doing your best to stay ahead of it and to proactively communicate with them, I think goes a long way to maintaining calm.
Yeah, I think one thing we can expect from the US immigration space relatively soon after Trump is installed as president is a travel ban based on nationality. And, folks are, looking to sort of advise their foreign nationals, their teams now. And it's one of those things where, like, we don't know what nationalities are going to be included. We don't know how broad the travel ban will be. And so making sure all the information in our system is up to date. So as soon as there's some indication of who will be impacted, we can run those reports and then be advising more specifically because what we don't want to do is like shut down businesses' ability to like move their people unnecessarily. So again, work with your
Yeah,
teams to make sure the data is there. There's a
yeah.
protocol and how to communicate when there are updates. Final thoughts for 2025.
I think just staying really diligent and, trying to make sure that you've got good data, that you've got good support from your provider so that you can be ready for whatever 2025 throws at you, because I think it's going to be quite a year.
Thank you, Audrey, as always, for providing your insights for what's going on in the world of immigration all throughout 2024. We're excited to see what is to come in 2025, and we'll rely on your expertise to support us and the Business Immigration Benchmark in the next year. Thanks, Audrey.
Thanks so much, Laura.
Just to wrap here, thank you all for tuning in to the Business Immigration Benchmark. It's been a fun year of figuring out how to podcast. So, for those of you who've been along for the journey, thank you for listening. We'll be taking the rest of the month to prepare and refresh the podcast for 2025. If you've got questions, thoughts, any type of feedback, please drop me a note on LinkedIn. Would love to hear from you. And thanks for tuning in to the Business Immigration Benchmark. We'll see you next year.